anything like that, let's start with the assignment that we're going to do when the book is done. So rather than create a longer essay that has you explore things, we've already done that. We're going to try to focus on building depth in quickly. When we talk about doing the actual test, just over, okay, good. It just like blinked and was like, hey, you're offline. But I don't know. The 45-minute limit can be really difficult because they want you to talk with depth about this novel, but you have to do it in a very quick format. And you know that there's only so much you can write in 45 minutes. So to help practice with that, I've given you a list of lots of themes that are all present in the novel. All you have to do is choose 3 from that list that you understand well. And we're going to write 3 one-page responses. And we really want to try to keep to that one-page ideal so that we limit how much we're writing, but we focus on really getting to that depth. And so one thing that I'm going to suggest heavily is, as you look at writing these, consider the one scene from the book that most clearly illustrates your understanding of that theme. And then use that as your way to examine the theme rather than just summarizing and retelling the story. And so we have time for that. And if you do have questions with it, ask. But with this section that switches times, we now jump forward and we see these children of the second generation. We do see some of these themes really come out a little bit more. And I want to start with kind of my title here. Descriptions of the book often describe Wuthering Heights as a Bible of hell, that regardless of when we are focused on, things at these 2 houses are awful, terrible examples of how life should be, that the morals are skewed, and that it presents this reality that is counterintuitive to everything most people know. And we definitely see this here. Which theme? Well, let's start with, did you have questions over the reading section that you still don't understand or that you're not sure of? So if we look at this section in particular, I wanted to isolate a few big ideas that come up that really can help us to guide and understand this depth, how the book is constructed. Let's start actually at the bottom of the list with parallelism. The book sort of becomes stripped in half if we think about it. Everything that happens pre-chapter 17 focuses on what we can call Generation 1. By the time we get to chapter 18 here, we're now focused more heavily on Generation 2. This is Kathy, Hareton, and Linton Heathcliff. What do you notice as a parallel between Generation 1 and Generation 2? Yeah, we definitely see how there's this definite through line of the parental influence that comes down and how they sort of fill roles that are similar. Who specifically do you think most embodies that Generation 1 to Generation 2 follow through? So if from my perspective, we have Kathy most specifically is that reminder of her mother, that mirror of sorts. Even think about in chapter 18, when we start, she gets away from Nellie on the horse, and when Nellie does catch up with her, where is she sitting? So when Nellie sees her, when Hareton brings her forward and we get all that, Kathy is literally sitting in her mother's old chair. And so we create this definite mirrored structure. We notice that Kathy, much like her mother, is a free spirit. She wants to explore. She longs to go out. She breaks the rules. She's willing to do those pieces like that. Is she a proper member, or does she best represent the qualities of Thrushcross Grange? No. Where would she be more at home? Based on how she is and how she acts. Is she more a Thrushcross Grange girl or a Wuthering Heights girl? She's a Wuthering Heights girl. She's stuck at the wrong house. Now think about Linton Heathcliff. He is a child that should not exist. He is born out of a loveless marriage. He is almost birthed in this moment of abuse and violence. And so because of that, think about how he comes out. He's an inverse of his father. If Kathy is a direct follow through, she's just like her mom. Linton Heathcliff is the inverse of his father, where his father is strong and wild. How would you describe Linton Heathcliff? He's weak? Huh? Oh, go ahead. I keep cutting you off. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. I just think he's spoiled enough. He expects things.
Yeah, he's spoiled. He's weak. He expects things. Look at that sequence where Kathy comes over to visit him and he cries because the pillows aren't arranged in a way he wants. He's a little like suckling hare. I don't even know how else to describe him. He's like a little animal that's wounded. But notice that he's the inversion of his father because his dad kind of made these choices, entered a marriage lovelessly, didn't treat it right, didn't do all that. He produces this product that is wrong in Linton Heathcliff. Why does Linton Heathcliff end up at Wuthering Heights? Isabella dies. Yes. Absolutely. And I think that's an important word that you used. He takes him. Heathcliff sees this child as property. Look at the way when he comes to pick him up, he speaks about Isabella from the get-go. He's literally calling her every derogatory term you could think of. He views this child as property because he understands how he can get his revenge on Edgar Linton, which is what we see by the end of this section. Remember, we said last week that the will is the way. Mr. Linton, old Mr. Linton, had written the will based on male heirs. Edgar Linton produced a daughter, but Isabella produced a son. So when Edgar Linton dies, Linton Heathcliff gets Thrushcross Grange. Because he is underage, he cannot personally own it. It goes to his father. And we will notice that because he has managed to marry Linton Heathcliff soon to Kathy, he is going to retain it even if Linton dies. Because women do not have that ability, it doesn't pass that way. So Heathcliff has manipulated this situation and he understands it from the second. It is why he views this child as property. Does he fit at Wuthering Heights? Think about how we have described Edgar Linton like a little cat the whole book. He escapes to his library. He is a man of society. He is not a man of experience. He is much like Linton Heathcliff. So what we see in this section is two characters that are at the wrong houses. And we said last time, when we move a character from one house to the other, we see the negative consequences, and we only exacerbate them here with characters that are born into the wrong houses, if you will. Let's talk about good old Hareton. Oh, Hareton. Who does he most remind you of if we talk about this parallel structure from Generation 1? This is Heathcliff's revenge personified. Since Edgar Linton since God, all the H names are getting me today. Hindley Earnshaw stole his education and treated him like a servant. Heathcliff only sees it fitting that now that he has to care for him, he will treat him the same way. And so we are presented with this rough male that should be a landowner. He should be a part of this more prestigious social class. And instead, he is just, wow. Even look at Kathy's reaction to him in chapter 18 when she meets him. And, Nellie has to present, like, be nice, he's your cousin. She's like, ew, that's disgusting. We see the two of them make fun of Hareton time and again, and that's only going to continue. It will be emphasized at one point, I don't think we have gotten there yet, where poor Hareton Earnshaw cannot even read his own name that is on the house. If you remember back from chapter 1, when Lockwood approaches Wuthering Heights, he says that on the keystone of the house, one of the foundational stones, is printed the date the house was built, along with the builder of the house, Hareton Earnshaw. So Hareton, who has inherited this name through his family, as he begins to learn to read, will finally recognize that his name is on this house, and it is only there that we see the true tragedy that education brings him, and awareness of what he has been deprived of. And so with these characters, we notice this parallel structure, but we should be able to talk about how it plays into the thematic pieces. Let's talk about walls and barriers. We have already established this in previous sections, but this one only brings it so much more so. You notice that many times certain parts of the plot are only able to happen because of a breaking of a barrier, whether that's a window that is left open, a door that is left unlocked or sometimes locked to keep someone inside. And we see how when we break those barriers, we kind of bring to meaning. Let me give you an example of this. Think of the moment that Kathy is walking along the wall with Nellie of the garden and she falls on the other side of it. Who happens to just be there? Heathcliff, magically, as though he has been waiting for this opportunity. He just happens to be there. So how does Nellie Dean get Kathy away from Heathcliff? She has to cross, but what she does is she breaks the lock on the gate in order to open it to bring her back. But now that the lock on the gate has been broken, what do we see that Kathy is able to do? And where does she go? It is the way that Kathy is able to go to Wuthering Heights to see Linton. So we notice that breaking that barrier, even though it's done for one reason, really allows us to see something more and give that character a freedom they didn't have before. We also see the inverse of it in the last chapter. Heathcliff locks up Kathy and Nellie when they come to Wuthering Heights. And we see that it's only because they are locked up that Edgar Linton ends up dying at that precious moment, that, Heathcliff's manipulation of this situation is full so that the will can't be changed and he gains ownership. So we notice when we break barriers, when we have those senses, we've got it. Let's talk quick about education, because we haven't brought that up the whole time. How does Kathy manage to get a horse set so that she can go to Wuthering Heights? So Kathy makes a deal with the stable boy. Do you remember what that deal is? How she pays him off to get everything together for her? She pays him off in books. It is a kind of currency at Thrushcross Grange because of Edgar Linton's library. And so we notice that education here is her way to gain freedom. We also notice that education, to some degree, as we've said, is a shackle on Hareton Earnshaw. It has been denied him. And they use it as a bully stick to make fun of him, these other children. And that will persist as we go. We definitely do see different things like social class become much more definitive in this section. because of what Hareton has lost, what Linton feels like is owed to him, and sort of what Kathy has always grown up with. Remember, she is a child of privilege. We see manipulation through Heathcliff. We also see that manipulation through Linton Heathcliff's illness. Notice that this book has multiple characters, Catherine Earnshaw, Linton Heathcliff, who are able to use their illness as a way to gain power in situations. And so Linton definitely in this part manipulates the heck out of poor Kathy to get what he wants. And even if you wanted to look at love here, I would point you towards the conversation that Kathy and Linton have about their views of what marriage is. Remember, they're very young, and so they see marriage in a very particular way, and it helps us to understand sort of where they're coming from. Next week, we will finish the book, and so make sure to